Hello, everyone. Hello.
Hello.
Hi. Okay, awesome. Let me switch off the music. It's very laggy, right?
Super.
All right, welcome to episode 5.
5.
5 of our Saturday Night Live real estate talk. All right, and today's topic is going to be who's gonna buy my property? Who's gonna buy my property?
Yeah, it's getting more expensive, right?
Yes, absolutely. I think it's getting more expensive. But maybe why do you think we are asking this question? Do you guys have any experience? What happened like from the ground? You guys are speaking to clients every day. What have you guys noticed with the recent property prices going up? Right? How are clients actually reacting differently? And what are some of the questions and comments that you have faced?
I think there's quite a few of my friends and also clients who ask now, like, oh, prices now are getting a bit quite expensive, right? So if I do happen to buy now, then let's say in a few years' time, I decide that maybe I want to upgrade, I want to move away, I want to sell my house, then will I be making a loss? You know, who's going to buy my property? Will I make a loss or not?
I see. I think the main gist is like whether or not people will be able to afford our property. Right? Actually, in fact, there's been a recent article about this as well. I think you should take a read and understand where what is this news about, what's this census about, and how does it affect property prices in the future, right? So it's very important because I think it came in a perfect time to understand whether or not people are able to afford property prices in the future, because properties are going higher and higher, especially private properties, and we have like so many HDBs going over $1 million, right? And this is private. This is not even private market. This is like public housing that is going for over $1 million, right? While at this juncture we think that okay, it doesn't make sense for HDBs to be so expensive, but do you see that sooner or later such properties will become a common norm, and people will start to accept such prices, in time to come, right? So I think one of the main questions that we got to ask is whether or not, like if today I purchase a property, right, will the people, when it's time for me to sell, especially with last year having so many new launches, when it's time for me to sell, do I have people that can afford to buy these properties, right? And also, whether are we in a property bubble, right? That's some of the main questions that I think today we should try and do our best to address these questions. All right. So I hope that our audiences today here learn a little bit of stuff as well as we go through this. Okay. So let me take your attention to somewhere over here. All right. The first question that I want to ask is that is our Singapore property market, is our Singapore property too expensive? 是不是太贵了呢? Let's see. Okay. Now let me share the screen. Now the first thing I want to take your attention to is how property prices, right, actually in some ways is very much correlated to our GDP. Okay, now as you can see over here, right, in this screen over here, let me shift the. Yeah, okay, as you can see in our screen over here, right, what we are comparing here is how Singapore GDP actually compares with other countries such as Hong Kong, Thailand, New Zealand, China, South Korea, Taiwan, Malaysia, Australia, and UK. So essentially, the main economies in the world, as well as the surrounding economies around us in Asia, especially Southeast Asia, right? So if we look at these countries, right, this study is done by UOB Global Economics and Market Research, by the way. Okay, so these are actually in-depth study on how we have actually recovered or progressed since the 2008 and 2009 crisis, right? So if we compare these countries, you can actually see that Singapore is actually one of, if not one of the best growth in terms of GDP, right, our gross domestic product, right? In which in our last episode we actually spoke a little bit about GDP and how the economics function, right? So if let's say you want to learn and understand a little bit about how economies work and how we actually have more and more money and how inflation work, right, you can actually take a look at our episode 4. Okay, now, so in simpler terms, right, GDP essentially, right, is a reflection of our purchasing power. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Right? I believe most of you will agree that GDP essentially is the country's purchasing power, right? As long as our purchasing power increases, right? Logically speaking, do you agree with me that the property prices will also increase somewhat in tandem as well?
Yeah.
Right? Because so maybe Jocelyn, I can ask you a simple question. If let's say you are a seller today and you know that Jason Wong's income has increased, right? And I really want to buy your property. Will you price your property higher or lower?
Higher.
Higher lah, because you're all very bad. You want to sell me expensive property lah.
Because we know you can afford it, right?
So this applies. This is put into very simple terms, but this applies throughout the whole Singapore, right? If we know that there are people that wants to buy, right, and that the income has increased, right? Will the sellers actually want to increase their prices as well. Right? When sellers increase their prices, they transact at a higher price, right? And then there's many people like Jason Wong whose income has increased, right? Do you think that if, let's say, there's only 2 properties that you and Jocelyn, yourself, and BB is selling, but there's many of me, right? Well, do you think that I will be more motivated and willing to offer a higher price as well? Definitely, right? So because of this, because of this income increase, right? People with more money, buyers will tend to offer a higher prices and be more willing to offer a higher price, whether by force, because there's so many competitors, or by choice, because they simply can afford, right? And sellers at the same time, right, knowing that there's so many people that income increase, right, over the last maybe 5 or 10 years, definitely they will want to sell their properties at a much higher rate, right? So in a sense, GDP would be able to lighten us on our property price. It should go up. So technically speaking, Singapore property prices should be shooting up because why? Our GDP per capita is actually higher than Hong Kong, New Zealand, South Korea, Taiwan, Australia, and even the UK, by the way.
Yeah.
Right? But is this the truth? Did property price increase in tandem with GDP? Let's look at the next slide. And the answer is no. Right? Why? Because while we are comparing the same couple of countries, the New Zealand, Hong Kong, China, Shanghai, Beijing, Taiwan, and all this, right? By the way, calling Taiwan a country is a little bit sensitive. So, but let's not talk about that. Yeah, and the rest of the world, right? Singapore property price index from 2009 and 10, right? Actually underperform all these other countries above. Actually, like Malaysia or something. Right, so all these countries actually outperform Singapore in terms of the private residential properties relative value, or the property price index. All right. So what does this graph represent? It essentially means that today, if we were to put the last economic crisis back in 2008 and 9, which was the housing crisis, right, as a base point of 100 points since then, how much have other countries recovered versus how much did Singapore recover? Now, do you see that Singapore, this green line, right, is one of the only ones that actually dropped a lot. And why did it drop, right? Is because of all the cooling measures that has been happening for the last 10 over years.
Yeah.
And the important thing is the TDSR. When TDSR happened and they cut the allowable income for your loan, right, from 80% to 60%, right, which means that for every $10,000 salary, you only can use $6,000 to repay your loan. Now it becomes a point where people they're able to afford, suddenly they cannot afford, right? And let's take a look at how many cooling measures have actually happened. It's this slide over here. Of course, we won't go into detail, but essentially, right, these are the different cooling measures that has happened over the last 10 years since 2009, right, to curb that rising runaway market. So in a sense, looking at this graph, right, we have so many cooling measures. If, let's say, property prices were to drop for whatever reason, this, in a sense, is like 10 layers of shield. Because why? Anytime the property price decreases to a point where it's not good for the residents, the citizens of the country, right, or whoever they invest in Singapore, all the government has to do is to remove one of the cooling measures, right? Because these are cooling measures, man. So if the market is hot, they do the cooling measures. If the market is cool, like the Singapore property market actually drops instead, where people are all, wow, I'm losing money. Do you think the I honestly, in my opinion, I don't think the government is incentivized to have property prices dropping and everybody losing money. I highly doubt they are incentivized for such a situation. Would you agree?
Yeah. I think
Right?
the government's main aim of all these cooling measures is not to like crash the market, right? It's more like to keep the market stable.
Absolutely. Yes, yes, yes. I absolutely agree. Yeah. Stable in a sense that they don't want the property market to crash, neither do they want the property market to shoot up so high until it's no longer controllable. Right? Case in point, our friendly neighbors in Hong Kong, right, where the young people can never ever buy a property. Like I have an aunt that actually stays in Hong Kong. She has a house, thankfully, right, because she belongs to the last generation. But she's actually saying, right, that the youngsters in their country can never ever buy a house. Like never ever, unless they are rich kids, right? The income gap over there is starkly different. But they can never buy it because the queue is like 20, 30 years long for public housing, right? And private housing is simply out of reach, right? So I think that we are in a much better position, in my opinion, with all these cooling measures. And if really Singapore really for some reason, right, crashes, at least we have these 10 cooling measures as a shield to actually revive the interest of the Singapore property market, which is very important, right? Okay. By the way, are you guys on the live as well so that we can see if there's anybody asking us any questions?
I'm on Facebook. I'm
Okay, we
monitoring
don't have.
Facebook.
I don't think we have any questions as of now, right?
No,
Okay, great. It's okay. No worries. Let's carry on then. Okay,
except
no
for
worries.
maybe.
Okay, so now let's take a look at whether the next point I think is relatively quite important as well on whether are we in a property bubble, right? Or who's gonna buy our property, right? And for that, let's explore the home price to income ratio in Singapore, all right, compared to the rest of the world. Okay, now, so home price to income ratio essentially it's in a sense is a how do I put it? Like imagine if you have an income of $10,000, okay, and then after that the property costs maybe $1 million, right? Let's say a property costs $1 million, right? If your income is 10K, right? Imagine if you totally don't eat, don't buy anything, like you don't buy clothes, you don't buy car, you have absolutely no expenses at all. Okay, how long will you take to pay off this $1 million property? It's just 1 million divided by 10,000, which will take you about 100 months, right? So essentially, this home price to income ratio, right, is just a form of calculation. Assuming there's no expenses at all, how long does it take you to finish paying a piece of property, right? For BTOs, essentially, it will, on average, it will take about 2.4 years of your 2.4 years to finish paying a HDB, right? For resales, it takes 3.3, and private it takes 6.1. So essentially, do you see that if let's say we have a certain amount of income, right, and then after that we have the number of years of loan that we have, right? Even for private property, on average, it only takes us 6.1 years, which is how long is it? 6.1 multiplied by 12 is 73 months, right? Before we actually fully pay off a private house based on the income, the average income of Singaporeans. So this means to us, right, to me, right, that Singaporeans have a very low home price to income ratio. That means most people are able to afford it. right? So this is a simple understanding of home price to income ratio. And this is a little bit more detailed, right? The target group that we are looking at is the 60th to 80th percentile. So the rough majority of people that can actually purchase condominiums are like the average group of people, right? We're not talking about the low income group, neither are we talking about the highest 1% or 10% of income earners in Singapore, but taking the rough 60 to 80% percentile, right? This main group of people, right, have an average income, if let's say they were to buy a condo, the average income per household, by the way, is about 16,000. So this is how we derive into a 6.1 home price to income ratio. Okay? Is it difficult to understand so far, or do you guys understand what I mean? You ladies understand what I mean?
Understand.
Yeah. So looking at this, and we compare to Hong Kong, right? Using their income, an average price of Class B type of land and house, right, actually costs about 6 million, right? And the same 60th to 80th percentile of people in Hong Kong, the citizens of Hong Kong, earning $35,000 a month, right? It will take them 16 years to pay off. By the way, all these 16 years are 8 years, 6 years, and all that, right, is assuming this person do not have a single expense, which is impossible, right? This is why we don't pay, of course, we obviously don't pay off a house, most of us don't pay off a house in 6.1 years, doesn't pay off a HDB in 2.4 years. It's impossible, right? But we are just assuming if these people don't have a single expense, if you get what I mean, right? Okay, so and we compare Malaysia, even a country like Malaysia, right, where we have very affordable home prices. The key point is whether the locals can actually afford it. So while for Singapore, right, when we buy like when people buy holiday homes in Malaysia, it's very cheap because like 600,000 or 1 million in Malaysia, right, in Malaysian ringgit, right, you can actually get a very decent house, whether it's a condo or a piece of land and whatnot, right? But the key point is when you purchase this property, it is cheap to you, but when you sell it, who can you sell it to aside from other foreigners, right? And so if let's say other foreigners doesn't want to go into a particular country's property market, this means that you are left to sell to the locals, right? And if let's say the locals cannot afford it, say for example, case in point, like I mentioned, Hong Kong, the locals cannot afford the property in Hong Kong. You buy a condominium in Hong Kong. When you want to offload it, who's going to buy from you? You know, because the only people are foreign buyers as well. And the foreign buyers, right, will be looking at buying a new house again. They won't be buying unlikely they will be buying into a resale house that you have profited. You know what I mean? Yeah. So that's why it's very important to invest into a country where the locals can actually afford it. In which, if we compare this home price to income ratio table, Singapore is actually the lowest based on this the couple of countries that I've compared right? Like Hong Kong, Malaysia, China, London, San Fran, Tokyo, Vancouver, all these first world city states as well. Comparing all these first world city states, we have the lowest actually. So the people in Singapore can actually afford these condos or these properties, right? Anyways, by the way, Jocelyn, do you happen to have that news cut out, the newspaper article?
I don't have it cut out, but I can read it out for you. Is it about the census?
Yes, absolutely. Please do.
Oh, okay. So I think the most shocking revelation from the census that was reported is that 10 years ago, right, only about 29% of Singaporean households, right, were earning at least $9,000 a month in household income. But then 10 years later, fast forward to 2020, it jumped up to 44%. of households in Singapore, they're earning at least 9K a month. That's quite amazing, don't you think? It's like almost half of the population.
Is now earning 9K a month.
Yeah, at least 9K a month.
It's a Straits Times article, right?
Yeah. But if you Google census, Singapore census 2020 or 2021, you should be able to see it.
Okay.
Yeah,
After accounting for household size,
I think they go by house. They just did by household.
Oh my gosh, that's bad. Okay, I think I found the article. Okay,
Yeah. So you search like 9,000, you should be able to see something. We were quite shocked. We're like, oh, okay.
Hey, this is crazy. Then we have to reflect, no?
Then it's just there below. Can you see
This
you
one,
were
right?
there just now? Yes, this article. Yes,
Yeah.
you're right.
So rising household income, more working couples in Singapore over the past decade. Rising household income, that means that essentially more people are earning more, right? And now we have a lot of ladies that's joining the workforce and outperforming the guys, which I think is amazing, right? Okay, let me take a quick read. There you go. Okay, so median household income from work per household member increased by 4.2% per annum. That means that essentially it means that income has increased by 4.2% per household, right? Technically, right, real estate should increase at least 4.2%.
But right, if it's in tandem with income.
Of course, if it's like if we are in a perfect equilibrium,
yes,
then yes, it makes sense. But of course, we are not in a perfectly synchronized perfect economy, so this doesn't happen.
Jason, can you make your screen a bit bigger so we can see the words?
Okay, sure.
Yes, nice. Thank you.
Let me close this. There you go. Right?
You see the 9,000?
Yeah, where is it? Okay, yeah. Those earning at least 9,000 a month grew from 29% in 2010 to 44.2% in 2020.
Wow, it's almost half, right?
That's half.
Yeah, no.
That's half.
And then got the 20,000 one below. The next paragraph is about 20,000.
Significantly, the share of households earning at least 20,000 more than doubled from 6.6% to 13%.
Wow.
Oh my goodness. Who's those people that are secretly earning a lot of money? If you're watching,
Jason,
just now that
one is you, right? The picture. That Dabao many food. You scroll and see, yeah. Is that you?
This guy is not as muscular as me,
Right.
Okay, but it's quite cool. I mean, I would never have expected that 44.2% of people are earning at least 9,000 a month.
Yeah,
crazy, right?
That means everybody that you see, every 2% that you see, one of them making like 9K.
I think this is as a household, I believe. As a household.
Yeah. As a household, Yeah. So every one of their household at least 9K, which is actually I think
very healthy.
Very healthy.
Right? Yeah.
Very healthy. Right? More than so can you imagine the data that we actually shared? The study that we did is a study that is done in 2017.
Yeah.
So this means that our household home property price to income ratio might have adjusted even more positively as well.
I think so.
Yeah. Right. So I think these articles, right, clearly, I think it is telling us something. People are earning more as compared to 2010. And in a sense, will people be able to purchase more properties at a higher price in the future? I do believe at this rate, yes, we can. Yeah.
Strong growth.
Yeah, very, very, I think it's very strong, very, very strong outlook in terms of whether people are able to purchase these properties. Yeah. And key point, I think the key point is, I think we've been talking about this all the time. Every single episode, we go back into this point again, in which our property movement now has nothing to do with foreign investors. You know, it's crazy. Like, I just cannot imagine when all these wealthy people come back to Singapore, you know, and they start snapping up the properties in whether is it the CBD areas, the out of central region areas, and especially so that Singapore has been on a trailblazing decentralized planning since 20 years ago, right? By decentralizing, I mean moving the city out of the city. The first ever project that they have done is all the way in the east, which is Tampines. That's where the telecoms are, like Singtel, and a couple of banks are there as well, right? They're moving the CBD area out to Tampines, and then after that they have a huge site that they did it all the way in the west, which is our Jurong Lake District, Jurong East. I think back then, maybe like barely 10, 15 years ago, it was an empty piece of land. I remember going to the MRT and I'm like, this place has nothing. And then now you have all the shopping malls like Gem,
Gateway.
Gateway.
Westgate. Sorry, Westgate.
Westgate. Oh,
yes.
Westgate. Then the
Gateway.
Westgate. And IMM is there.
That's my favorite outlet mall.
Me
really?
too. I go there to buy furniture.
That's where me and Celeste used to date, by the way. Yeah. You know why? Because that's where OCS is, the army camp.
Oh.
So every time we get to sneak out, we'll go to IMM.
I see.
Yeah. So that's that. And so it has improved so much, right? Because if we had known, I mean, back then there wasn't even Gem all these, right? If there was Gem and all these, right, we would have went there and not go all the way to IMM because so much further, you know what I mean? Yeah. So that was back then lah. Yeah. So point is, Jurong area has improved by so much, right? And then we now have the Jurong Lake District that's up and coming, right? And then after that, there's the second decentralized area. And then we have the third one, which is in Paya Lebar, where we have SingPost, right? And this is like now one of my favorite hangout areas. The SingPost area. What's the
PLQ, is it?
PLQ, yeah, PLQ Mall. Very nice barbecue over there. Food, everything is awesome. A lot of people that want to stay there because it's so close to the city, right? That's one of the third projects of our decentralization plans. And finally, the last one that is really up and coming is the Punggol Digital District. Fourth University is going to be there. They're going to be like driverless. I mean, the first projects for driverless buses is going to be in the Punggol Digital District, right? And then you have a huge amount of new jobs that's going to be created in the Punggol Digital District as well. So all these decentralization plans will make other areas aside from the CBD very attractive for our foreign buyers. And when the foreign buyers come in and the floodgates open again, right, then we'll have another surge of property buyers, new demand coming in, right? Because as of now, we are in a situation where supply is dwindling. Supply for new launch, supply for resale, supply for resale condominiums, right? And resale HDBs, right, is dwindling, right? But our demand stays the same, relatively the same, because there's no new buyers, man. There's just a fixed amount of Singaporeans in the country, right? It's not improving by much. It's not decreasing by much either, right? So when new foreigners come in, I think the private property market will really start to move by then. So it becomes a question. The question becomes whether or not do you want to be someone that have a property to sell to these people, or do you want to be a part of the demand where you are gunning to buy a piece of property? I think the obvious choice is being someone that has the supply, as in being one of the suppliers of property or land and whatnot.
But which do you think is the most affordable district? Maybe for those like youngsters who is getting their first house.
Affordable district, you mean, are you talking about like HDB or private?
Maybe private for the youngsters, you know, that they don't want to buy BTO. They want to straight away go for a private. Which do you think is the most affordable district for them?
Well, firstly, I think it depends on a lot about what kind of needs does this young couple have, right? Because in our team, we always focus on needs first, right, before anything. So we have to identify whether is this person looking for an investment property, or is this person looking for something that they have to stay immediately?
Stay immediately, How about that?
So if let's say we're talking about staying immediately, right? Probably a place such as the northern side, like Woodlands, Admiralty,
Canberra.
Sorry, Canberra. Yeah,
Mm.
Canberra is an amazing place to start, right?
Yeah.
Because right now, right, what we are seeing in the north region is something that we are seeing in the in the west back then, Jurong Lake District, before all the things were developed, right? Now they are starting to develop the north area, right? And then the Canberra area, there's a lot of new ECs that's coming. That has already been there as well.
Province, Park Canberra,
Park Canberra, yeah. So they're when government actually put all these EC land over there, I think it shows certain signs that they have intention to develop the area. Otherwise, why put the residents there? You know, before Punggol Digital District was called Punggol Digital District, right? It was just Punggol New Town, like our Punggol. There's nothing there, you know. Then after a while, then all these news start coming up. So I think it shows they have to put the residents there first, because if there's no residential areas over there, no one's staying there. You put jobs there, but nobody is gonna work there. Also, you know what I mean. So I think the phase one is always put people there first. Then subsequently they will add in the commercial zoning, the B1 industrial zoning, and all this. Then after that we have a nice balance between supply and demand over there. I guess to answer your question, I think the northern region is a place to start looking, right? Or even the east, like Tampines or even Pasir Ris, right? Because there are developments there, right? There's relatively new, right? Not so old until young couples, if you want them to move into 20, 30-year property, I think it's too much because it's very a little bit dated, maybe a little bit out of fashion, maybe, right? And things start to get old. So for a young couple, they want to stay in a very nice condition, relatively new place, you know. So I think places such as Pasir Ris is somewhere nice to look for. Case in point, there's actually a 3-bedroom being sold at like 800,000+.
Wow.
I sold it. Yeah, so it's a beautiful place. It's convenient, right? They're actually building an integrated development over there, right? For the viewers today that's watching, what does integrated development mean?
No, I know.
Yes. Jocelyn, go ahead.
So a normal mixed development, from what I understand, is that there's commercial spaces usually at level 1. So there's shops, amenities downstairs. So when you say integrated, usually there's also an incorporation of a transport hub. So be it like a bus interchange or MRT station, then this will make it integrated. Yeah.
Awesome. That's like on point.
Are you talking about Pasir Ris East?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I'm actually talking about Pasir Ris. Yeah, so with that new integrated development over there, do you have to buy a brand new launch? You don't, obviously you don't have to, but there is a new development that is there, or you can take advantage, right, of the integrated development by buying something that is right beside the integrated development that is way cheaper. You know, so these answer the questions from BB, right? Whether or not, hey, can I buy into something that I can immediately stay? Hey, you can, right? With potential for future development in terms of price, because of all these Pasir Ris and whatnot, right? Sounds cool?
Cool. Yay.
Awesome. Okay, I think we spent like almost an hour talking about this topic, right? And I hope today everyone learned something, right? Every week we're gonna have a interesting topic that we try to answer questions that we face on a daily basis, right? People that are concerned whether or not is it a good time to purchase properties, whether is it safe, right? And anything that's under the sun about properties. So if let's say you have any questions at all, right, feel free to ask in the comments below so that we can identify what is the immediate questions, the burning questions that people really, really want to know. And then we can just answer them for you immediately, right? So submit your questions, and then after that we will actually answer them next week. Right? Cool?
Cool.
All right. Thank you so much, you guys, for joining our Property Live show today, Saturday, episode 5. We're gonna have episode 6 later on, and more and more and more. Okay? All right, see you guys.
Good night.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Off?
Are you?
I'm not sure.
Still there.
Still on.
We are still live.
It's always this challenge. I always cannot figure out how do I switch off this light.
Oh, yeah, still